Welcome to the Renaissance Achiever with Sarah Fui. And today we have special guest Mama Kai. Her legal name is Cara Lynn Sanders, and I've just always known her as Kai. And we actually met many years ago. We were housemates back in Hauula, Hawaii. For almost a year we lived together. I remember that you were hustling and you were doing your soul food plate lunches, and that's the first time I ever had black eyed peas. And they were delicious. I was like, I know the band, but I've never tried them. And then now I'm living in Georgia, and I'm a Southern girl now. So I'm going to read Mama Kai's bio. So for the last 2 years, she has lived in her car with her young black male superhero, whose name is Wisdom. That's your son. How old is he now?
He's 9.
He's 9. She's affectionately known by her superhero name, Mama Kai, because she found her superpowers being Wisdom's mom and student. I love that. We are such students of our kids. Despite the hardships they endure and even having had the finances to be housed, she continues to actively embrace the idea that all things work together for good. She's currently active in fulfilling the call of matriarch by redesigning the city of her maternal grandfather's ancestors, Raleigh, North Carolina, into a city of motherly love. I love that. Tell me more about that call to redesign your city. What do you mean by that? What have you been working on?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me. It's another amazing
Yes.
day in paradise. I gotta say
Yes.
that.
Yes. That's her catchphrase.
That's my signature line. But it's not copywritten, so I want everybody to use it.
I love it.
Well, I'm going to start by saying this. 2 years ago, right before the mayoral election here, late October 2022, God spoke to me and said, Raleigh does not need a new mayor. It needs a matriarch. And so I thought that meant that I was supposed to run for mayor. So that's what I put my papers in last fall, like 3 weeks before the election. I was able to participate in 2 candidates forums. And when all was said and done, I realized that as a citizen, I have more power than these people who are going to be elected. And then I was realizing that from from the outside looking in, how so many of them had to lose their humanity in order to run. They were
Yeah.
attacked for different reasons, disrespected in so many different ways. Politics makes people lose their minds. It's a very nervous system unregulating time in our society for whatever crazy reason.
Politics
Is
are
just
wild.
yucky. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so when all was said and done, I was like, this isn't going to solve the problems that our city has. Somebody who is a mom who like cares for people, because if you think about a mom, in fact, I was on a call earlier this week where there was a mom and she was talking about how one of her daughters was more accelerated than the other one. And so there was one that needed a lot of support, but one that was an achiever. And so with moms, we navigate those things, right? We don't displace or ignore the high achiever because of the needs of the one who is struggling a little bit more. We figure out how to balance and meet the needs of both. And
Yes.
so
Yes.
that's what I feel my call is to look and see how we meet the needs of both, of all demographics, that we're not just focusing on the low income Black community, but we're putting sidewalks into the affluent community, because when they built those houses 50 years ago, before it was affluent, they didn't have sidewalks.
Yeah. It's serving everybody. You
Right,
want to serve everybody. Yeah.
right. And because everybody's need, even though they're different, it doesn't displace it as a need.
Love that. I love that perspective. And that's why you're such a mama. That's a mama's perspective, not a politician perspective. So first of all, can I just say that is so brave of you to just get up there and run for mayor. That is huge and brave in that big city. And to do that as this single mother, Black woman who's just like, yeah, I'm going to do this. Can I just ask you what that experience was like for you?
I think everybody just thought it was a joke, and I
Mm.
really didn't care. Like,
That's why I love you. You're like, I don't care. I'm going to do what I feel inspired to do. Yes.
It took me a while to put everything together because I was supposed to have a treasurer. I had two people that said they would be a treasurer. They both dropped out unexpectedly. And finally, I kept reading through the paperwork and realized I could be my own treasurer. And like there were
Mm.
some stipulations that I had to work on where I wasn't fundraising. So I didn't need to have like a separate bank account and all this other stuff. So I was like, oh, well, I'll just be the treasurer and file under threshold, which means that you can't spend more than a certain amount of money. I think it's like $1,000. And I spent nothing, you know? So
You just
I
got up there
was
and did your thing.
right.
Yeah.
Right. And so literally I registered on October 10th because there was a candidates forum that night that I wanted to participate in. And so I went there to this event that I knew thousands of people would be at. And I walked up and said, I just registered as a writing candidate for today. Can I be up here? And they said yes. And I thought I was going to be able to share my platform and everything. And it turns out that they had pitched their questions to the candidates in beforehand. And I was in absolute opposition to the things that they were asking. And I stood up there and said that. And they
Wow.
literally said that we were only to answer the questions yes or no. And I said no because I didn't know. I was like, what are you talking about? One of the requests was to change the affordable housing budget from 30 million to 70 million. And I was like, you can't do that without raising people's taxes. Like we just don't have revenue coming from anywhere else that would support that. You know what I mean? And property values have literally skyrocketed here.
Mm.
It had already gone up like 25% in 1 year. Not only was the tax rate was raised, but the property values were raised as well, which means that people were paying way more than they had in years past. And I was like, I'm not even willing to add 5 cents to that. People are already struggling, you know? So I did that.
That's so brave. Can I just say, for someone who's been houseless for the last couple years, to go up there and say, no, I don't want to raise the budget for housing because I'm looking at the whole picture, right? Wow.
And I didn't even get to say that. That's the thing is that it was just
Yeah.
answer a yes or no question. But in my heart, I couldn't do that. I couldn't
Mm.
do that. But that was the reason why, because there's other people whose lives are at stake. You want to do this and you think that for some reason that money would also go to your organization, you know, to build the houses that you have plans to build, but we don't do that either. You know, and it was just it's their questions simply spoke to the fact that they didn't understand how the government worked in the first place. And I was just like, no,
They weren't
no.
asking the right questions to get the good answers. That must be so frustrating. And I guess, is that kind of why you realized, like, I have more power as a citizen than a politician? Because as a politician, you're so boxed in and constricted to what you can do, right? And so it's just like, let me go out there and just make actual change without the title. And that's what you're doing now. Yes. So tell me more about that and how you're making change in that way.
So, um, besides running for Mama Kai for Matriarch, that is my platform. That's my latest campaign. I really believe, especially considering the current national administration that we are experiencing, that we have in the last few years, but particularly because of COVID, I think, but we were actually kind of on that trajectory anyway, but we really have lost the sense of community in so many ways. And even though we have more ways to connect because of technology, we really aren't as connected as people. I think we reach back more to the connections we already had than that we reach forward to new connections. And with the city increasing in density, we're almost at 500,000. But considering that maybe 10 years ago we were at 125,000, that we've yeah,
Wow. Huge,
quadrupled in
huge growth.
size in a decade,
Yeah.
you know. And they say that we're only going to get bigger. And so I think it's really important that you can't just increase density. You have to intentionally create community. It's not the same
Yeah.
thing.
And it's even harder to create community when you have a huge influx of people coming from different backgrounds and different cultures and who are disconnected from each other. It's like you have to be really intentional about redefining what that community is going to look like, right? So when you say you're running for matriarch, Mama Kai for matriarch, and that's your campaign, what does that mean? Like, are you just trying to get your name out there at a local activist, or what do you mean by that?
Well, I've been doing a lot of work. I speak at our city council meetings every month. We have two.
Awesome.
And so I'm pretty well known within the city, especially with our employees, because I attend as many events as I can. But I also just try to be in community spaces and show up as a mom. Wisdom's always with me. And what that means is that I want to be hired as the mom of the city to handle the things, which means people would pay into me and I will address, like I said, the poverty that's in this community, but the sidewalks that are needed in this community.
Advocate, just going around advocating for people because you are dedicated to showing up and speaking, being a voice for the people in
Right.
these
For
spaces.
everyone.
Cool.
You know,
Yeah.
it really is one thing, nonprofits, not to speak ill of them in any way, shape, or form, but they get established with an intention to help one demographic. And when they're raising money, it's just to help whatever it is they're trying to help, whether it's people or pets, they only have this one thing that they're raising money for. But what I want to do is I want to raise enough money to help everybody. And I want to start big, and then I want to phase the amount of money I need down so that we can transition into just being a property manager, because affordable housing is really where the biggest challenge is for people. And if we can start with making sure that everybody's needs are met, then I feel like people will pay into something when they realize, especially people who are affluent will pay into a pot when they know that they're going to benefit from it in some way.
More affordable housing will make the rates everywhere more affordable, right? If you're saying that the city 4x'd in a decade, then there's just not enough housing. And so it's really expensive for everyone, right? So building is an issue.
And also just that if we generate enough money, and I have a plan. The plan that I have is called a revolutionary act of love. It's an act of self-love, it's an act of Black love, and it's an act of community love. It's an act of self-love because individually we need it. And also because if you are in any way, shape, or form religious, then our scriptures say, do unto others as you would have done unto you, or love thy neighbor as thyself. So we should want for others as what we have. And of course, that looks different for different people. But if we also have this element of compassion, that's why that word is so important to me, then we want to be a part of those who are alleviating the suffering.
Yeah.
And so it's also an act of Black love because we know historically that Black communities took care of themselves, but so many were violently dismantled. If we want to be honest, right? So many were violently dismantled. And that dismantling is what caused the government to come in and take over the care of the Black community, which left so many in generations of poverty. And so when you talk about public housing, we have so many public housing places, but we have generations that have lived there. And because any attempts at upward mobility are thwarted by a loss of benefits, then people stay.
Yeah. It's like to keep them trapped and dependent.
Exactly. And so if this money would be invested in helping people move into a state where they can become upwardly mobile, that way more public housing units that we know are kept affordable can be used by other people. And then the community love is just that we are all one in the sense of a city, a community, however you want to break it up. We are all one as a people. And when it affects one, it affects all. Even if you don't know how what is going on down the street by that person is going to come back to you in some way, shape, or form. And so it's important that we do something that's radical, that's revolutionary, but that's also loving. And that's why I'm inviting people to B3C with me that's committed, compassionate, and crazy. And that crazy is crazy enough to think you can change the world, because it comes from a quote by Steve Jobs. For those people who aren't familiar with it, he talks about how people, they here's to the crazy ones, the rebels, and the round pegs in a square hole, the ones that are not fond of rules. Guilty.
Yeah. You are the change makers, right? The change
Yeah.
makers. When you said that when you ran for mayor, people just thought it was a joke or you're crazy. And it was like anyone who has ever made history, who has done something very impactful or revolutionary was considered crazy before they were considered a genius, right? It's like you have to have that passion and solid belief in order to do something big and to make a change. And so I love that about you. Can I ask how you got really involved in politics and activism and why? Because I think a lot of us, we say we care and we read about things and it touches our heart, but do we get out of our houses and go to city council meetings and do we go to rallies and are we participating? Not as much as I would like to. However, I know that it's important. And so what, I guess, lit that fire inside of you that you said, I'm going to dedicate my life to this?
Well, probably our journey with living the experience of being unhoused. Right now, we're blessed to be in a hotel, but our lifestyle is living in a car. Initially, it's about a year and a half now, from May of 2023 to January of 2024, I served on the homelessness task force, which was a joint effort of the city and the county, and nothing happened. And I was like, well, this is ridiculous. And then during that time in October of 2023, the city hired a new housing and neighborhoods director, and she's been phenomenal. They just launched a pilot of a program called Bringing Neighbors Home, and they were able to close down, officially decommission one of the 60 plus camps that we have in the city, which was beautiful. But living in our car, me and Wisdom living in our car, we don't qualify as homeless because we have a shelter.
Your car is considered a shelter. So they won't let you into housing because you get to sleep in a car.
We
Wow.
are technically not considered homeless because we have a shelter. People who stay in shelters are not considered homeless because they have a shelter. And parents who are keeping a hotel over their kids' heads or maybe living in an Airbnb if they can afford it, or, doubling up with family or friends or something like that, their kids may qualify for what is called a McKinney-Vento benefit. It's a federally mandated service that comes through the school system. So here in Wake County, we have between 5,000 and 6,000 students who are eligible for McKinney-Vento services. But if their parents are not living out in the woods, they are not considered homeless. And so we
Mm.
don't get counted when they do. There's a point in time count by HUD county. It's called our continuum of care, and for us, it's the county to receive HUD funding to help address homelessness. So we're not counted in that.
Only the kids are, only if you have kids.
The
And
kids aren't
so
even counted.
the kids aren't even counted
They're
because,
only eligible for the
wow.
services through the school, but they're not even counted.
And what is the school services that they get? What does that entail?
It depends on the school system because I've heard that in some school systems they can help with like putting a family in a hotel or something like that. They don't do that here. And I think some of it is like they can get additional tutoring. They may even also have some additional counseling services for them because of the traumas that they're enduring. But here it's not very comprehensive. It's really just an acknowledgement of, okay, we know you're in house. Oh, one of the things that they do is that if a child it has been attending a school and they move out of the area that they were living in that was for that school, they can get bus transportation or private transportation to school every day, to and from
So they
school.
don't have to transfer.
Right. So they don't have to transfer. And so,
So they have more stability in their education, at least. They're not bouncing around from different schools. That's a good service.
that's one of the things that McKinney-Vento is mostly known for.
Okay. So this is a personal question. And I
Mhm.
think a lot of people would be curious about that because I think a lot of people are just uneducated or uninformed about people who are unhoused. And I know that a lot of people hold prejudices about it, but to see that this is an educated, intelligent mother with her child who is out there and providing value to her community and still struggling with this, right? That there is, different types of people who are struggling with being unhoused. And has there been prejudices that you have come across in your experience?
Yeah. Mostly I found that people lack emotional intelligence. And they feel that for some reason we should be less resistant to their demands and be willing to submit to whatever treatment they want to give us.
Like you should just be grateful we're trying to help you kind of
That
a
part.
mentality.
I
Ugh.
wasn't gonna go there, but yeah, that's those yeah, it's usually along those lines.
Yeah, you get what you get kind of a thing and just taking the humanity out of it like, hey, you're a person who has opinions and needs and just yeah, that's hard.
It is, and that's why, like, really at this point, or at some point at some point it wasn't, I was choosing what God was leading me into.
What do you mean by that?
One of the things about, and I can't speak for everyone, but in my situation, it has become a choice to be unhoused. And it has been a blessing simply because I have seen the goodness and compassion of people and I can speak to that. So I know what people are capable of. Those challenging situations have not in any way overrun all the incredibly phenomenal experiences that we have had. And
Of
the reality
compassion.
is that us being unhoused, I am living a life that is so much like what the Savior did. And so when the Savior came, he came and lived the way he did so that he could understand that experience in first person. And I realized that when I was younger and I had these big visions of being rich and helping the world, that I probably would have brought trauma into people's lives with a high-minded attitude that I had about how I was going to help people.
Being a rescuer.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
But now that I am here, I can understand the traumas that people are enduring, that being unhoused is a trauma on top of whatever trauma they are having, they had that got them into being unhoused, which doesn't even begin to address the traumas they may have had as a child. So being unhoused, I have been able to tap into. I took up my parent coaching course. I was able to do, even though I was unhoused, I could have never paid full price for that. They worked with me so that I could afford it. I got a scholarship with the Food Revolution Network so that I could take their plant-based coaching certification, so that I can bring plant-based nutrition to the community and stuff like that. And so the challenge is that when you're unstable, it is really hard to launch a business and focus on this is what you're supposed to do. This is what you're supposed to do. And finally, I was like, because I was just talking to God about this about a month ago, maybe 2 months ago at this point, and I was just like, I can't do this like everybody else. I was really frustrated. I was upset. And he was like, I know. He's like, you're not supposed to. This is my work. You just do what I tell you to do, and we're going to roll with it that way, you know? And I was like, but I'm also terrified.
That's what makes you a Renaissance achiever. You're not trying to do it like everyone else. You weren't meant to. And I really love what you said about this experience of you being unhoused is part of your calling because it teaches you how to serve the people in this demographic because who is better to help someone than someone who has firsthand experienced this and can really know what their needs are and their pain points are, right? So when you said you chose to continue to be unhoused, tell me a little bit about that. You had an opportunity to be housed, and why did you choose this path?
So back in December of 2023, Wisdom and I were featured on this platform called the Pandemic of Love, and it's run through Instagram at Mindful Skater Girl. Her name is Shelly Tygilski. We were connected through a mutual acquaintance. And what she does is she put our story on her Instagram platform and invited people to send us money directly. And our campaign generated almost $21,000.
Awesome.
The majority of that came in in less than 48 hours.
Whoa, what a mind-blowing experience, right?
It really was.
Yeah.
And that money helped to house more people than me in wisdom.
Mm.
And it took me a long time to talk about it because 2 months later we were back in our car. But the tears are not of shame. It was because every time I started getting down on myself about it, God was like, don't you dare. He was like, don't you dare. My scriptures say, lay down your life My scriptures say, do unto others. My scriptures say, love your neighbor as yourself. You did all of that. Don't you dare be ashamed. And so it became more of an honor that I was in that place because I helped people get through a really tough time at Christmas when nobody else was thinking about them, you know? And so it was a blessing. All things work together for good, you know, to those who love God and are called according to his purposes. And so last year I was like, you know, I know how much this took care of. And so what if I went back and I looked at all the transactions that came through my email because they came through Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App. So I went through all the transactions and I numbered them, and there were 329 direct transfers, and they all came in different amounts. And so I said, okay, if I do this times 1,000, then I'll get $20 million. And so I have this 3-year plan that breaks it down where I start with, we're going to shoot for 1,000 times this amount. So that means 329,000 people for $20 million. And we're going to do that for 3 months. And then we're going to start going down. We're going to take it to 750 times. Then we're going to go to 500 times. Then we're going to go to 250 times. We'll do that the first year. Then the second year, we'll go down a little bit further. And in 3 years, we're just going to do 10 and 20 times, 25 times, and then 10 times. And in that amount of time, we'll have generated about $170 million, which will help people get into affordable housing that will pay for a year for somebody to live and to have some breathing space. You know, the one thing that I found in um, this experience with being unhoused is we had a shelter experience. And it was so traumatizing to me. I didn't have the words to understand what it was at that time. It wasn't until after I took my parent coaching course that I understood what my nervous system was trying to tell me. But afterwards, when I looked back, I was like, oh, no, 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 no. They have people so distraught and living from an unregulated nervous system, which means they're not tapping into they're not tapping into that prefrontal cortex to their logic. They're living literally out of fear and doing things. I remember this mom who she needed some help getting her CDL reinstated. She had some experience where it got suspended. It wasn't anything like a DUI or anything. She just needed to pay a bill in order to get her license reinstated. And she could have been making 25, 30, whatever, right, for driving a truck. And she ended up having to get a $10 an hour job at a convenience store because nobody would just pay that bill. And so when I realized that they only move people from one level of poverty to another, I was like, I can't do this. I was living so much in an unregulated state that, and I couldn't understand why I was always not wanting to be in that space, why I was always like secluding myself. I didn't want to be rude, like I was bougie, but I didn't feel comfortable, and I didn't know why until literally 3 years later. And so what I want to do is we put people in homes, we give them mentors, and we give them the support. We ask people what your dream life looks like, and we create a plan for them to achieve that so that they can have an opportunity to create some upward mobility so that within 2 to 3 years, they are in a position where they want to give back to the community. They're paying forward in their community because they were helped. And so there's obviously going to be people that need way more support. So we want to make sure that people who need that kind of mental support, emotional support, they have those tools and they're in a community that supports that, or in a neighborhood where they feel welcome and safe. But that's not
Can
what's out there now. And
yeah.
so that's my revolutionary act of love, that people are going to pay me to implement this, that I do not trust myself to handle that money. So I got to figure out a way for it to come in.
Because you're just gonna wanna help everyone all at once, which is what you did because you saw the need, and I think that is actually very common, I think, in unhoused communities, is that they understand firsthand the struggles, and there is this sense of community because the struggle is real, that any bit you get, you share with others, and then you get each other's back when it comes around, and that's beautiful. Like, can we bring that sense of community to the more privileged people too and spread that around? So when you're talking about, I think this is an important topic and kind of segue into your other project you have, but dysregulated nervous systems. So if someone is unfamiliar with that term, can you explain what that is?
Sure. It's really the foundation of what I want to teach. It's actually the foundation of my emancipated parenting that I'm working on launching. And it all goes back to those first 3 to 5 years that we got here. And during that time, that's when they say children's brains are like sponges. Well, they're like more than that. I mean, when they call it the foundational years, we literally develop how we're going to behave as adults during those 3 to 5 years. And what that means is if we have highly traumatic experiences in those years, then our brain gets triggered to act in a flight, fight, freeze, or please, or some people use um, fawn manner as a way of self-preservation. Means that if our nervous system, not our brain, but our nervous system perceives anything as a threat, whether it's real or perceived, then our brain goes offline and our nervous system does whatever it can to protect us. So when children are hit or something like that, that sends a trigger to protect yourself. And so for some children, that's the fight back. But literally for children, it eventually becomes this thing where you flight, you run away, or you freeze, or you cower, or whatever. But the reality is that as an adult, that might come out different.
Mhm.
And so when you're triggered, that's what it means, that your nervous system is activated and your brain is offline. Your
Yeah.
logical thought is offline.
You're acting out of normal character because you're in self-preservation mode where
Yep.
I'm gonna lash out and be aggressive towards the store clerk, or I'm gonna be avoidant and not talk about this really serious issue with my roommate or whatever when, we could just easily talk about it, or yeah, people pleasing, all of those things, right? So I can imagine when you're in a shelter with a bunch of dysregulated people who are just acting out of their inner wounded parts and triggered, that just pulls out the self-preservation mode in yourself, right? And you're just absorbing all of these energies. Yeah, it's a lot.
For
So
me, it was I wanted to run. you
yeah,
know
yeah,
and
yeah.
I just felt this great need to protect wisdom, so I tried. During the day we would just go, we would spend time at the library and at the parks and things of that nature. And so even now, I had somebody ask me if I ever utilize the shelters because they do have them open, and I say there's no way. There's
Not
no
with
way.
a child. Yeah, you're
No.
even for yourself. If you're trying to heal and grow, it's not. It's not. And I
And
don't
even
think
for
people
him,
realize
because
that.
he picks up on that energy,
Yeah.
even if,
Yeah.
and he's seeing behaviors that I don't want him to feel comfortable, seeing and judging or picking up on and utilizing, like kids are master imitators. And
Right.
so, and if they're not getting enough rest or proper food, like, whew, that's a whole other story that just makes that experience that much more challenging, you know?
Totally. So the Emancipated Parenting Project, that's a curriculum that you're creating. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So I went through my parent coaching course. And when I learned about brain development, nervous system regulation, trauma, and nutrition, I call those my big four. I was led to reflect on three different concepts. One was oppression, one was emancipation, and one was a liberation. Those I could consider my three levels of peace, like how you get to peace. You have to address those. Oppression is established in childhood. We never go back far enough. We keep oppression in silos and we talk about it in these silos, but whatever ism you want to put on it, it is oppression. And what I realized is that one, oppressed people oppress others. And so if you start with parenting, when you're raising a child, if you aren't educated to understand that child's capacity as a child, that there are not many adults, that you're in the process of raising adult, but their adult brand doesn't start developing until 7, and they don't finish developing until at least 25. And then that is also compromised because it depends on what's in there, right?
Right. And what happens during those developmental years, right?
Right,
Yeah.
right. I was just contemplating, like, the first time you tell a child no, that's their first experience with oppression. because the child doesn't know, they're just exploring. They're just being curious about the world they live in. And depending on how many times they're told no, how many times they ask the question why and it's not answered, then that's when the oppression begins to set in. And these things are caused by our parents and our caregivers. And I'm not throwing any shade. In fact, I have to state for the record that I believe that all of our parents did the very best they could with the
Hmm.
education they had and the circumstances they were living under.
Yes, absolutely. And everyone's still gonna have issues. Like
Yes,
that's what I always tell my clients, and we're all gonna get messed up somehow or another, right? And can we
absolutely.
differentiate? Okay, because you mentioned your first experience with oppression, which I agree with, is when you're told no, and then it's like, oh, I'm not allowed to do this thing. However, there is healthy boundaries where we're protecting and guiding and disciplining a child to teach them what's appropriate. And that's not what we mean by oppression, but that's their experience of like, what is okay or not okay. And it becomes this level of oppression if they don't have a voice and they're not heard and you're not listening or explaining. You're just like, nope, child should be seen and not heard. That kind of attitude that's going to create the oppression. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you for
Yeah.
clarifying that because it
Yeah.
is super important that there are times when you definitely need to, when it's a safety issue, we want to jump on that no. But a lot of
Yeah.
times it doesn't have to be that extreme. It could be like, oh, wow, we're going to redirect to something else. Or,
Yes.
this is for such and such. This is not for you right at this time, and just help
Hmm.
understand. I call wisdom my anti oppression kid because at some point he just started telling me I was bossing him around because I would just tell him what to do. And I was like, you're right. I mean, I'll own that. You are a
Hmm.
person. You have
Yeah.
priorities, you have things that you want to do that are different from what I want to do at this time. So let me figure out how to treat you like a person and not diminish you because of your age.
Yes. 100%.
And so for me, oppression is that first level, and we see that played out in so many ways, especially now. It's very, very evident that oppressed people seek to oppress others. And so I chose the word emancipated because of its definitions. I mean, most people know the word emancipate as freedom because of the Emancipation Proclamation that freed the slaves. A lot of people don't know that it's a legal definition that stands for the legal separation of a child from their parent. And so for me, emancipated parenting is like the spiritual separation of that inner child from the nervous system regulation and the brain development that happened under the hands of your parent. Like you're becoming emancipated from things that are no longer serving you. You're healing that inner child and giving that child space to grow up and feel seen. And also, as Dan Siegel would say, soothed, seen, safe, and secure, I think are the four ones that he uses
Yeah.
in his book.
That's
Oh,
beautiful. Emancipating the inner child. I
yeah.
love that.
And then that leads us to that ability to step into our liberated space, which I feel is like that's the freedom to live the life that you want. Because a lot of times we are so held back. I was saying when I was putting my heart before God, and I was like, I'm terrified. And he was like, it's okay. I get it. It's not supposed to be easy, because you're not doing this for your ego. When you're working on anything, they tell you to define your why. And I kept saying that because I want wisdom to be able to grow up in the world and become whoever it is that God intended for him to be. But then the question came up in the back of my head that said, then why are you still unhoused? And that's when I had to go a little bit deeper because I heard somebody say that your why should make you emotional. It should make you cry. And I realized it was because my little girl needed a place to grow up and feel safe and to be whoever she was intended to be. And so that's my why. My why is as much of a juxtaposition as it is that I'm rising up to give freedom to other people to stay where they are if that's where they want to be, and it's okay that you have infinite, that we all have infinite and intrinsic value that we came into this world with and we will leave this life with, and it doesn't change despite what we do. Now, whether you want to
Amen.
have material worth or whatever, that's another thing, but your value is infinite and intrinsic, and
Mhm.
you are worthy of every good thing.
I love that shift that you made, and that's exactly how you are going to help your son to achieve those things, and that belief is by you doing that for yourself. And people don't realize that they want to do it for everyone else, and you can't until you do it for yourself. You have to be the example and you have to heal from your own stuff in order to be in a place where you can actually parent effectively, right? That's huge. That's huge that you're able to recognize that and have that self love for yourself. Thank you so much. This conversation has been amazing. And I want to know, how can our listeners find you or follow you? Where are you out there in the digital world?
You can find me on Instagram or at the Emancipated Momma. Also have my YouTube channel. Those are probably the best ways to reach out to me, or you can find me at Mama Kai on LinkedIn.
Awesome. And I'll drop all of those links in the show notes. I'll get those links from you and add them in.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah, my digital business card has all my contact information.
Perfect. And I have one last question for you.
Okay.
As a Renaissance achiever, what is a dream, an unfulfilled dream that you have in your heart that maybe not many people may know about?
An unfulfilled dream. Hmm.
Something that you dream of creating or experiencing at some point in your life.
Right now, honestly, I really am big on sustainability. And that's why I went through the plant-based coaching certification. For me, a parenting foundation should be good, nutritious food for your kids. And so, one of the things in addressing homelessness, one of the things that I want to do is create communities that are carbon neutral and completely sustainable. And so it was this idea of tiny homes that are built off grid, but within the city limits, so people could still gain access to things that they needed, but the housing was stable. One of the things that I'm working on that I would really love to achieve is getting enough people together to lobby or petition the General Assembly here in North Carolina to expand the use of rain catchment systems. Because right now, if you have them, you can use them for laundry and in your toilet, but you can't use it for like personal use. Like they don't recommend you drink it or anything like that. And so, if we could get rain catchment systems with water filtration systems built on people's homes, if we have that available to people, then we would get back to using nature instead of continuing to disturb. We can live as a part of nature and
Yes.
in harmony with nature instead of continually seeking to destroy it.
Yes. So that dream is connecting your vision of creating homes and also reconnecting to nature, even in an urban area, which is usually difficult. We're so disconnected, right? And it's like we have all of these resources. Abundance is from the earth. So why are we struggling to get clean water when we should just be able to get it from the rain, right? That makes logical sense. So I love that dream. So to create water filtration systems connected to tiny homes so that they can live off of rainwater. And yeah, that's actually a big thing on Big Island where I'm from. A lot of people in their private homes live off of rain catchment. We have big catchment tanks, UV filters, and like that's just a thing for like half the island. We don't have county water. So it's doable. It's doable. Cool. I love that dream. Thank you so much for being here today. It was fun to reconnect, and I will get those notes from you so I can put them in the links, and we'll have to keep in touch.
I just, in closing, just want to say, everyone, enjoy creating your amazing day. And thank you so much for continuing to be an example. I am watching you grow and as you take on huge stages, not just with your music, but with your voice in different ways. And I'm just excited for and just honored that you reached out to me to do this interview because I highly look up to you. I totally respect you. And I wish you the continued success as a mom, as a wife, and as a woman, and being the original Renaissance achiever in this generation.
Thank you. I love you.
Love you more.
Bye.